The stars looked different now that humanity could reach them. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Vanguard and watched the viewscreen display a system humans had never seen before. 3 months ago, Earth scientists had cracked faster-than-light travel. 3 months and everything changed. The Vanguard was exploring the Kepler 442 system when the sensors detected something unexpected. Ships, big ones. They appeared on the screen in a formation that screamed military precision. Jake leaned forward in his chair. His communications officer looked up from her console. Lieutenant Nina Torres had sharp eyes and quick reflexes. She was the best pilot Jake had ever worked with. Now she handled communications because they needed someone who could think fast. "Captain, we're being hailed," Nina said. "Multiple frequencies. They're trying really hard to get our attention." "Put it through," Jake said. The view screen shifted. An alien face appeared. It had scales like a lizard, golden eyes, and a crest of bone that rose from its head. The creature wore elaborate robes covered in symbols that probably meant something important. "Unknown vessel," the alien said in perfect English. "You have entered space governed by the Galactic Council. I am Commander Zenth of the Council Enforcement Fleet. You will identify yourself and prepare to receive diplomatic envoys." Jake glanced at Dr. Lisa Garrett, his chief science officer. She sat at her station looking fascinated and slightly concerned. Lisa studied aliens for a living, though until 3 months ago that meant studying theories. Now she was looking at the real thing. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Vanguard," Jake replied. "We're on a peaceful exploration mission. We didn't know this system was claimed by anyone." Commander Zenth's eyes widened slightly. "Earth? You are from the planet recently detected developing faster-than-light capability? The Council has been preparing to make formal contact. You must come to the Council homeworld immediately. This is a great honor for a new species." Jake looked at Lisa again. She shook her head slightly. They had talked about this possibility during the long flight from Earth. What if they met aliens? What if those aliens had rules? Admiral Kate Sullivan, the head of Earth's Space Defense Command, had been clear in her orders. "Be polite, be firm. Don't commit to anything. Thank you for the invitation," Jake said carefully. "But we're not authorized to make diplomatic decisions for Earth. We'll file a report when we return home. If our government wants to send diplomats, they'll let you know." The silence that followed lasted several seconds. Commander Zenth looked like someone had just spoken gibberish at him. His mouth opened, then closed. The crest on his head flattened slightly. "You refuse the Council's invitation," Zenth said slowly. "Not refusing," Jake said. "Just saying it's not our call to make. We're explorers, not diplomats." More silence. Then Zenth seemed to recover himself. "Very well. The Council will dispatch proper diplomatic representatives to your homeworld. Please provide coordinates." Jake rattled off Earth's location. It wasn't secret anymore. Anyone with decent sensors could have tracked the Vanguard's flight path. The conversation ended with stiff pleasantries on both sides. When the screen went dark, Jake let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. "That was weird," Nina said. "They expected us to jump at their invitation," Lisa said. She was pulling up data on her screen. "Did you see his reaction? Like we'd insulted him by saying no." "Admiral Sullivan was right to be cautious," Jake said. "Any organization that calls itself a council and has enforcement fleets probably likes being in charge. We don't need bosses out here." 2 weeks later, the diplomatic vessel arrived at Earth. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of the Vanguard. It looked expensive. Gold trim ran along its hull. Lights pulsed in patterns that probably meant something. The whole thing screamed, "Look how important we are." Ambassador Zixril stepped off the shuttle expecting a crowd. He was a Kreshtar, an insectoid species with 4 arms and compound eyes that glittered like cut gems. His translator device gave his clicks and whistles a smooth, cultured voice. He had served as Council ambassador for 200 years. He knew how first contacts worked, except this one didn't work the way it should. Earth kept him waiting in orbit for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. When he finally received permission to land, only a handful of minor officials met him. No crowds, no cameras, no ceremony. They took him to a plain conference room and offered him something called coffee. "Welcome to Earth," said the human across the table. Her name was Patricia Holmes, and she worked in something called the State Department. "We appreciate you making the trip." "The honor is mine," Zixril said automatically. "I bring greetings from High Counselor Varthek himself. The Galactic Council is pleased to welcome humanity to the greater community of spacefaring species. He laid out the standard introduction. The Council had governed the galaxy for 5,000 years. It maintained peace. It regulated trade. It mediated disputes. Joining was an honor that brought protection, access to technology, and a voice in galactic affairs. Patricia Holmes listened politely. She took notes. When he finished, she smiled. "That sounds very interesting," she said. "We'll definitely take it under consideration." Zixril waited for more. There wasn't any more. "Under consideration?" he said. "Yes. We'll need to review the membership requirements, discuss it with our various governments, that sort of thing. These decisions take time. But," Zixril said, struggling to process this, "surely you understand the benefits? Every species joins the Council. It's how things work." Patricia's smile never wavered. "We're a bit new to all this. We like to take our time with big decisions. We'll be in touch." The meeting ended. Zixril found himself back on his shuttle within an hour, heading to his ship in orbit. He sat in his cabin and tried to write a report to High Counselor Varthek. How did you explain that a species wasn't interested in the greatest honor the galaxy could offer? Meanwhile, Admiral Kate Sullivan sat in her office at Space Defense Command and reviewed reports. 3 more human ships had made contact with alien species in the past week. None of them had mentioned the Council. Instead, they'd simply introduced themselves, offered trade, and moved on. One ship had met a feline species called the Felixians. The Felixians were smugglers and traders who operated in the outer edges of known space. They didn't care much for the Council either. Commander Nina Torres, who'd transferred to exploration duty, had hit it off with their captain immediately. Captain Melkara of the Felixian vessel Swiftclaw had sharp teeth, sharper instincts, and no patience for bureaucracy. When Nina offered to trade raw materials for star charts, Melkara agreed instantly. "You're not with the Council?" Melkara had asked. "Nope," Nina said. "We're independent, you?" Melkara's whiskers had twitched in what might have been a smile. "Very independent. I like you humans already." The trade had taken 10 minutes to arrange. No permits, no approvals, just 2 captains who saw mutual benefit and shook on it. Well, Nina shook. Melkara had pressed her paw to Nina's palm in what was apparently the Felixian equivalent. Kate Sullivan read the report and allowed herself a small smile. This was exactly what she'd hoped would happen. Earth didn't need permission to explore space. It didn't need some ancient council's approval to make friends. Humanity would forge its own path. Light years away on the Council homeworld, High Counselor Varthek convened an emergency session. The Council chamber was ancient, built from stone that had stood for millennia. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the tiered seating. All of them looked confused. Varthek was old even by Dravosian standards. His scales had dulled with age, but his eyes remained sharp and cold. He had led the Council for 3 centuries. In that time, he had welcomed dozens of new species into the fold. Never, not once, had any of them simply said no. "Let me understand this clearly," he said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "The humans have been contacted by 5 separate ambassadors. All 5 have been politely dismissed. The humans claim they are considering Council membership, but they continue to expand into unclaimed space without seeking approval. Is this correct?" Ambassador Zixril stood. "That is correct, High Counselor. They are unfailingly polite. They simply appear to have no interest in formal diplomatic relations with the Council." "Have you explained the benefits?" another counselor asked. "The protection we offer? The technology sharing?" "Extensively," Zixril said. They nod, they smile, they say it sounds interesting, and then they do nothing. "Perhaps they don't understand the consequences of refusing Council authority," suggested a third voice. "What consequences?" Varthek asked sharply. "They haven't broken any laws. They haven't attacked anyone. They're simply ignoring us." The chamber fell silent. That was the problem, wasn't it? The Council's power rested on the assumption that species wanted to join. It offered benefits in exchange for compliance. But what did you do when a species simply didn't care about your benefits? "Send more ambassadors," Varthek ordered. "Offer better terms. Make it clear that cooperation with the Council is the only path to galactic prosperity." But even as he gave the order, Varthek felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time. Uncertainty. These humans didn't follow the rules. They didn't seem to care that the rules existed, and that made them dangerous. 6 months had passed since humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council. In those 6 months, everything had changed and nothing had changed. Human ships now operated in dozens of star systems. They traded with species the Council had never heard of. They made friends in the forgotten corners of the galaxy, and they continued to politely ignore every diplomatic overture the Council sent their way. Ambassador Zixril sat in the Council chamber and listened to report after report. Each one told the same story. The humans were friendly. The humans were reasonable. The humans absolutely refused to acknowledge Council authority. They established a trade depot in the Sigma Draconis system, one ambassador reported. When I informed them they needed Council permits, they smiled and said they'd look into it. The depot is now fully operational. Similar situation in the Outer Rim, another added. They're trading medical supplies with the deepwater species. No permits, no approval. They just started doing it. High Counselor Varthek's claws tapped against the armrest of his throne. The sound echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. His patience, which had lasted 3 centuries, was wearing thin. Impose economic sanctions, he ordered. Cut off their access to Council trade networks. Make it clear that independence comes with consequences. The order went out immediately. Council-aligned merchants were forbidden from trading with Earth or human vessels. Council banks refused to process human transactions. It was a strategy that had worked before. Species that tried to operate independently found themselves isolated and struggling. They always came back to the Council eventually, except humanity didn't come back. They barely seemed to notice. Paul Hendricks stood on the observation deck of a space station in the Outer Rim and watched ships come and go. He wasn't a military officer like Jake Morrison. He wasn't a scientist like Lisa Garrett. He was a diplomat, but not the official kind. Earth didn't send official diplomats to places the Council didn't approve of. They sent people like Paul instead. The station belonged to the deepwater species and aquatic people who lived in the cold oceans of their homeworld. They were quiet, peaceful, and had been members of the Council for 800 years. In all that time, the Council had systematically exploited them. Elder Kuthran floated in his water-filled chamber next to Paul. His translator device turned his sonar clicks into words. Your people are remarkable, Kuthran said. When we joined the Council, they promised protection and prosperity. What we got was quotas and restrictions. They take our resources and give us just enough to survive. Why not leave? Paul asked. Where would we go? The Council controls everything. Or they did until you humans showed up. Kuthran's eye stalks swiveled to look at Paul directly. You don't ask for permission. You don't wait for approval. You just do what needs doing. Paul smiled. We're new to all this. Maybe we don't know any better. Or maybe, Kuthran said quietly, you know exactly what you're doing. You're showing the rest of us that we don't need the Council either. That was the real problem, wasn't it? Humanity wasn't just refusing to join the Council. They were building an alternative. Every species that traded with Earth, every alliance formed outside Council oversight, every successful deal made without permits or approvals, chipped away at the Council's authority. Dr. Lisa Garrett was thinking about the same thing when she published her research paper. She'd spent months studying the Council's economic structure. What she found wasn't pretty. The paper detailed how Council membership requirements forced species into dependency. New members had to adopt Council-approved technology standards, which meant buying from Council-approved manufacturers. They had to route all trade through Council oversight, which meant paying fees at every step. They had to accept Council security forces on their worlds, which meant losing sovereignty. The benefits the Council promised were real, but they came with strings attached. Lots of strings. By the time a species realized what they'd agreed to, they were too entangled to break free. Lisa sent the paper to every species she could reach. Council members and non-members alike. Within days, it was the most discussed document in the galaxy. The Council tried to suppress it, but that just made more people want to read it. On the Council homeworld, Varthek read the paper 3 times. Each reading made him angrier. Not because the information was false, because it was true. The Council did maintain power through economic dependency. That was how civilized governance worked. You created systems that made membership necessary. Then you controlled those systems. The humans were exposing mechanisms that were supposed to stay hidden. Worse, they were offering alternatives. Trade without fees, alliances without surrender, cooperation without subordination. It was chaos dressed up as freedom. We need to make an example, Varthek told his inner circle. The humans have a trading post in Sigma Draconis. Send an enforcement fleet. Blockade it. Show the galaxy that there are consequences for defying Council authority. The fleet arrived 3 days later. 20 Council warships surrounded the human trading post and announced that all traffic was suspended until proper permits were obtained. It should have been simple. The humans would see they were outgunned. They'd submit. Order would be restored. Captain Jake Morrison received the news while the Vanguard was 2 systems away. He called Admiral Kate Sullivan on Earth. "They're trying to blockade us," he said. "I heard," Kate replied. Her voice was calm. Too calm. Jake recognized that tone. It meant she was 3 steps ahead of everyone else. "What do we do?" "Nothing," Kate said. "The blockade only matters if we care about it. Do we have other routes to that region?" Jake pulled up his star charts. "Several. The Felixians know at least 3 alternate approaches that bypass Council patrol routes. Use them. Keep trading. Let the Council sit there watching an empty piece of space if they want." That's exactly what happened. Jake contacted Melkara, the Felixian smuggler who had become humanity's most reliable trading partner. She thought the whole situation was hilarious. The Council blockading a trading post? Melkara's laugh sounded like purring mixed with a growl. They really don't understand how smuggling works, do they? There are always other routes. She shared the coordinates for 3 different approach vectors that avoided Council sensors. Within hours, human ships were using them. The trading post continued operations. The only thing the blockade accomplished was making the Council look foolish. Ambassador Zixril watched the whole mess unfold from his office. He'd been a loyal servant of the Council for 2 centuries. He believed in what the Council represented: order, stability, peace. But watching them try to strong-arm humanity was like watching someone try to grab smoke. The humans didn't fight. They didn't argue. They just went around every obstacle the Council put in their path, and every time they did, they made the Council look more ridiculous. Zixril received orders to make one more attempt at direct diplomacy. He was to go to Earth personally, carrying a message from High Counselor Varthek himself. The message offered extremely favorable membership terms: technology sharing, trade advantages, a seat on the Council itself, something usually reserved for species that had been members for centuries. Admiral Kate Sullivan met him in her office at Space Defense Command. She was younger than Zixril expected. Humans lived such short lives, yet this one commanded respect from every other human in the room. "Ambassador," Kate said warmly. "Welcome back to Earth." Zixril presented Varthek's message. He laid out the benefits. He explained what an extraordinary offer this was. Kate listened patiently. When he finished, she smiled. "That's very generous," she said. "But Earth isn't interested in Council membership. Admiral, I don't think you understand what you're turning down. The Council is offering you something species wait centuries to achieve." "I understand perfectly," Kate said. Her smile faded, replaced by something harder. "You're offering us a seat at your table. That's nice, but we'd rather build our own table." "Why?" The question burst out of Zixril before he could stop it. "Why would you refuse this?" Kate leaned back in her chair. "Because Council membership means giving up sovereignty. It means following your rules, using your systems, asking permission for things we should be able to decide ourselves. We've been governed by others before. We're done with that. The Council provides structure. Without it, there is chaos. Or freedom," Kate said quietly. "Depends on your perspective." Zixril left Earth feeling something he hadn't felt in a very long time: doubt. He'd always believed the Council was necessary. That species needed guidance and structure. But the humans were doing fine without it. Better than fine. They were thriving. Reports continued to flood into the Council chamber. 12 Council member species had begun negotiating bilateral trade agreements with Earth. They weren't leaving the Council, not yet, but they were testing the waters, seeing what was possible outside the established framework. 3 non-Council species in the outer territories announced they were forming a trade cooperative with humanity. No hierarchies. No central authority. Just mutual cooperation and shared defense. Varthek saw the pattern forming. The humans weren't just refusing to join the Council. They were building something to replace it. An alternative network of alliances based on voluntary cooperation rather than... 1 year after first contact, Earth hosted something that shouldn't have been possible. Delegates from 32 different species gathered in a conference center in Geneva. Some were Council members. Most were not. All of them came because humanity had invited them to discuss something radical. An alternative to the Galactic Council. They called it the Alliance of Independent Worlds. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood at the podium and looked out at the assembled delegates. A year ago, she'd never seen an alien. Now she was addressing a room full of them. The moment felt surreal, but the stakes were very real. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "We've invited you here because we believe there's a better way to cooperate in this galaxy. One based on voluntary association, rather than mandatory compliance. One where each species maintains its sovereignty while working together for mutual benefit." A murmur ran through the crowd. The idea was simple, but its implications were revolutionary. For 5,000 years, the Council had been the only option. Now humanity was offering something different. Elder Kuthron of the Deepwater species spoke first. His water tank had been specially prepared for the occasion. "My people have been exploited by the Council for centuries. We stayed because we saw no alternative. Now you offer us hope. We wish to join this alliance," other voices joined in. Species that had been marginalized by the Council. Species that had never been invited to join. Species that had tried independence and been crushed for it. All of them saw in the alliance a chance at something better. Paul Hendricks worked the room like he'd been born to it. He'd spent months building relationships with these species, learning their concerns, understanding their needs. Now he helped craft a charter that addressed them all. The charter was simple. No species would be required to join. Any member could leave at any time. Decisions would be made by consensus, not by diktat. Trade would be open and fair. Defense would be mutual but voluntary. It was everything the Council wasn't. While the summit continued, Captain Jake Morrison made a discovery that would change everything. The Vanguard had been exploring a remote sector when they found it. A derelict Council surveillance station still operational, monitoring human space. "They've been watching us," Nina Torres said. She'd transferred back to the Vanguard for this mission. Every transmission, every ship movement, every trade deal, all recorded and sent back to the Council homeworld. Jake studied the station on the view screen. It was old but sophisticated. Clearly, the Council didn't trust humanity to regulate itself. They needed to keep tabs on this troublesome species that refused to follow the rules. "What do we do with it?" Nina asked. "Destroy it?" Jake smiled. "Better idea. Tow it to Earth orbit. Make it a museum exhibit. Show everyone exactly what the Council thinks of sovereignty and privacy." They did exactly that. The station arrived at Earth the same week the Alliance Summit concluded. Its presence was broadcast across every channel. Here was proof that the Council, which claimed to respect member sovereignty, had no problem spying on species it couldn't control. The revelation caused chaos. Council members began demanding explanations. How long had the Council been conducting surveillance? What other species were being monitored? The Council's leadership had no good answers. High Counselor Varthek watched his carefully constructed order crumble. 4 Council member species formally announced their withdrawal. They were joining the Alliance instead. Dozens more sent delegations to Earth requesting information about membership. "This is war," Varthek declared to his inner circle. "The humans are dismantling everything we've built. We cannot allow this to continue." "War?" one advisor asked nervously. "Against whom?" "The humans haven't attacked anyone. They've simply offered an alternative." "Then we declare the Alliance a threat to galactic peace," Varthek said. "We send warships to Alliance worlds. We make it clear that defying the Council has consequences." Ambassador Zixril listened to this plan with growing horror. He'd served the Council his entire life. He believed in order and stability. But this wasn't about order. This was about power. The Council wasn't trying to maintain peace. It was trying to maintain control. That night, Zixril made the hardest decision of his life. He packed his personal belongings, copied files he wasn't supposed to have access to, and boarded a transport to Earth. When he arrived, he requested asylum. Kate Sullivan met him personally. "Ambassador Zixril, this is unexpected." "I bring information," Zixril said. His voice sounded tired. "The Council is preparing military action against the Alliance. They plan to intimidate member worlds into compliance. I cannot be part of that." Kate studied him carefully. "Why defect? You could have just warned us anonymously." "Because I realized something," Zixril said. "The Council demands loyalty through fear. You humans earn cooperation through respect. I would rather serve a cause that values freedom than one that demands obedience." The intelligence Zixril provided was invaluable. Council battle plans, fleet deployments, political pressure tactics, all laid bare. Kate studied the information and began making preparations. Dr. Lisa Garrett coordinated scientific exchanges across the Alliance. What the Council had always restricted, the Alliance made freely available. Species shared technology, research, and expertise without barriers. Within weeks, collaborative projects were producing breakthroughs. A Felixian navigation technique combined with human computational power created faster, safer hyperspace routes. Deepwater medical knowledge merged with Alliance resources produced treatments for diseases that had plagued multiple species for generations. The benefits of cooperation without coercion became obvious to everyone watching. Meanwhile, the Council's threats began. Warships appeared in orbit around Alliance worlds. Council ambassadors delivered ultimatums. Submit to Council authority or face consequences. It was intimidation, pure and simple. Commander Nina Torres received new orders from Kate Sullivan. Take a fleet to each threatened world, not to fight, just to be there. To show that Alliance members weren't alone, Nina coordinated with Melkara and other independent captains. They assembled a motley collection of human ships, Felixian traders, and vessels from a dozen other species. It wasn't much compared to the Council's military might, but it was enough to make a point. The first confrontation happened at the Deepwater homeworld. Council warships had been orbiting for 3 days, running threatening sensor sweeps and broadcasting demands. Then Nina's fleet arrived. The Council commander hailed them immediately. Unidentified vessels, you are interfering in official Council business. Withdraw immediately. Nina's response was calm. This is Commander Nina Torres of the Alliance Defense Cooperative. We're here at the invitation of the Deepwater government. We're not interfering. We're just visiting friends. You are making a mistake. The Council has the authority to enforce galactic law. What law? Nina asked. These people left the Council. They're allowed to do that, aren't they? Or is membership mandatory now? The Council commander had no good answer to that. Technically, species could leave the Council. It just never happened because the consequences were always too severe. But with the Alliance providing an alternative support network, those consequences didn't matter anymore. The standoff lasted 2 days. Then the Council ships withdrew. They'd achieved nothing except demonstrating their impotence. The pattern repeated at other Alliance worlds. Council threats met by Alliance solidarity. Every time the Council backed down. Back on Earth, the Alliance Summit concluded with 32 species signing the charter. Elder Kuthran spoke for many when he addressed the assembly. For centuries, my people believed we needed the Council. We were told that independence meant isolation and weakness. The humans have shown us the truth. Independence means freedom, and cooperation without coercion makes us all stronger. The celebration was short-lived. News arrived from the frontier. The Council was mobilizing its military forces. Not small enforcement fleets. The full Council armada, hundreds of warships gathering at the border of Alliance space. High Counselor Varthek had made his decision. If the Alliance wouldn't submit to diplomatic pressure, he would crush it with force. The message was broadcast across the galaxy. The Alliance of Independent Worlds is declared a threat to galactic peace and stability. All member species have 1 week to renounce their membership and return to Council authority. Failure to comply will result in military action. Jake Morrison watched the broadcast from the Vanguard's bridge. Lisa Garrett stood beside him, her face pale. Can we fight them? She asked quietly. Not in a straight fight, Jake admitted. The Council has been building its military for thousands of years. We've been in space for barely a year, so what do we do? Jake thought about Kate Sullivan, about Paul Hendricks, about every decision humanity had made since discovering faster-than-light travel. They'd never tried to match the Council's power. They'd simply refused to acknowledge it. We do what we've always done, Jake said. We say no. On Earth, Kate Sullivan convened an emergency meeting of the Alliance. Every member species sent representatives. The question was simple but critical. Would they stand firm or would they back down? Elder Kuthran spoke first. My people have lived under the Council's boot for 800 years. If we surrender now, we prove that freedom only... The Council armada assembled at the border of Alliance space, 300 warships representing the military might of dozens of Council member species. It was the largest fleet mobilization in 2 centuries. High Counselor Varthek stood on the bridge of the flagship and felt satisfied. This display of power would end the human rebellion once and for all. The ultimatum had been clear. 1 week for Alliance members to submit. That week was ending. Varthek expected capitulation. Every species eventually bowed to overwhelming force. That was how the galaxy worked. That was how it had always worked. Then Admiral Kate Sullivan's response arrived. One word. Broadcast across every channel in known space. No, just that. No explanation. No negotiation, no fear. Simply, clearly, definitively, no Varthek's claws scraped against metal. These humans, they didn't understand power. They didn't respect authority. Fine. He would teach them through force what they refused to learn through wisdom. But while Varthek prepared for war, something else was happening. Something he didn't see coming. Ambassador Paul Hendricks sat in his office on Earth and began uploading files. Thousands of files, documents Zixril had provided before defecting. Records Melkara had helped acquire through her smuggling network. Evidence that human intelligence services had gathered over months of careful investigation. The files detailed everything. Council economic exploitation, political manipulation, bribery and corruption at the highest levels, and most damning of all, High Counselor Varthek's personal dealings, funds diverted from member species into his private accounts, trade agreements structured to benefit his clan, resources allocated based on kickbacks rather than need. Paul uploaded it all to the Galactic Information Network. Every species had access, council members and non-members alike. The data was authenticated, cross-referenced, and undeniable. Transparency is a weapon, Paul said to his team. The council built its power on secrecy. Let's see what happens when we shine a light on everything they've hidden. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Council member species discovered they'd been systematically cheated. Minor species learned that requests for aid had been denied while Varthek's clan grew wealthy. The carefully maintained image of benevolent governance shattered like glass. Captain Jake Morrison and Melkara were putting the finishing touches on their own contribution. They'd infiltrated council space weeks ago, using smuggling routes and false transponders. Their mission was simple but dangerous. Gather evidence. Get out alive. They'd found more than they expected. Secret surveillance networks monitoring council members, blackmail files on prominent politicians, plans for suppressing dissent. The council wasn't just corrupt. It was rotten to the core. Got everything? Jake asked as they prepared to jump to hyperspace. Melkara's whiskers twitched with satisfaction. Everything. Financial records, communications logs, surveillance footage. This will burn their house down. Good, Jake said. Let's go home. The evidence arrived as the council fleet prepared to advance. Paul uploaded it immediately. The galaxy watched in real time as the council's darkest secrets spilled into public view. Dr. Lisa Garrett coordinated with moderate council members who'd been growing increasingly uncomfortable with Varthek's aggressive stance. She didn't have to persuade them. The evidence did that. She just had to provide a channel for their concerns. We had no idea it was this bad, one council delegate told her privately. We thought the council maintained order. We didn't realize we were propping up a criminal enterprise. It's not too late to fix it, Lisa said. The council could reform, become what it claims to be, a voluntary association for mutual benefit, not a protection racket. The delegate looked thoughtful. That would require removing Varthek. And changing everything about how the council operates? Yes, Lisa agreed. It would. On the flagship, Varthek watched his carefully constructed authority collapse. Species were recalling their ships from the Armada. Not all of them. Not even most. But enough to matter. The fleet that had been 300 vessels was now 250. Then 200. Then fewer. His own subordinates approached him with questions. Why hadn't he disclosed the surveillance networks? Where had the emergency aid funds actually gone? How much had he personally profited from his position? Varthek tried to maintain control. These accusations are Alliance propaganda, lies designed to weaken us at a critical moment. But the evidence was too solid, too detailed, too damning. Even loyal council members couldn't ignore it. As the week drew to a close, Commander Nina Torres positioned the Alliance defense fleet at the border. They were vastly outnumbered. Even with the council defections, the remaining ships outnumbered them 5-1. But they stood ready. Nina opened a channel to all ships, Alliance and Council alike. This is Commander Nina Torres. We don't want war. We never wanted war. We just want to be free. If the Council fleet attacks, we'll defend ourselves. But we'd rather talk. The choice is yours. Varthek heard the message and laughed bitterly. Talk? After everything that had happened? After the humans had dismantled his authority piece by piece? No, there would be no talking. There would be an example made. All ships, he commanded. Prepare to advance. Weapons to full power. On my mark, we cross the border and eliminate the Alliance forces. Then we move on to Earth itself. The fleet began positioning for attack. Weapons charged, shields activated. The moment of confrontation had arrived. Then something unexpected happened. Admiral Krelvan, commander of the Council military forces, opened a private channel to Varthek. High Counselor, I must speak with you immediately. Not now, Admiral. We're about to engage. That's why I'm calling, sir. My officers are refusing to advance. Varthek felt ice in his veins. What? They've seen the evidence, sir. The financial records, the surveillance, everything. They're asking why we're attacking species that have done nothing wrong while our leader has been stealing from us all. Those are lies, and you know it. Are they? Krelvan's voice was quiet, sad. I've served the Council for 40 years, sir. I've served you for 20, and I've just learned that everything I believed was built on corruption. I can't order my people to die for that. Varthek realized he was losing control, not just of the situation, of everything. Admiral, I order you to advance, and I'm sorry, High Counselor. I can't do that. And neither will most of the fleet. It's over. The channel closed. Varthek looked at his tactical display. Ship after ship was powering down weapons. Not all of them. Some remained loyal. But the fleet was dissolving before his eyes. Then we go without them. Varthek snarled. He opened a channel to the ships still under his command. Maybe 30 vessels. Barely a tenth of what he'd started with. All loyal ships with me. We'll show these traitors the price of defiance. His flagship began to advance. A handful of ships followed. Then, as they crossed the border into Alliance space, Admiral Krelvan made one final intervention. High Counselor Varthek, you are hereby relieved of command. By order of the Council Military Authority, and in accordance with emergency protocols, you are under arrest for corruption, misuse of office, and unauthorized military action. Security forces boarded the flagship's bridge. Varthek tried to resist, but his own guards turned on him. They'd all seen the evidence. They knew what he'd done. As they led him away, Varthek looked at the view screen showing the Alliance fleet. The humans hadn't fired a single shot. They just stood there waiting. And somehow, impossibly, they'd won. Nina Torres watched the Council fleet power down and withdraw. She'd been prepared to fight. Prepared to die if necessary, but there would be no battle. The war was over before it began. She opened a channel to Kate Sullivan on Earth. Admiral, the Council fleet is standing down. Varthek has been arrested by his own people. Kate let out a breath she'd been holding for days. Good work, Commander. Bring everyone home. On the Vanguard, Jake Morrison and Lisa Garrett watched the news spread across the galaxy. The Council was in chaos. Varthek arrested. The Armada dissolved. Everything had changed in a matter of hours. We didn't fire a shot, Lisa said wonderingly. We didn't have to, Jake replied. Kate understood something the Council never did. The truth is more powerful than any weapon. Corruption can't survive in the light. Zixril stood in Kate Sullivan's office and tried to process what had happened. The Council he'd served for 2 centuries was collapsing. Not from external attack, from internal rot exposed to the galaxy. What happens now? He asked. Kate looked thoughtful. That's up to the Council's member species. They can rebuild, reform, create something better, or they can dissolve entirely. Either way, it's their choice. And the Alliance continues as planned. We're not trying to replace the Council. We're just offering an alternative. Species can join one, both, or neither. Freedom means having choices. Zixril nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand. The humans hadn't tried to conquer the galaxy or reshape it in their image. They'd simply refused to accept the rules others tried to impose. And that refusal had exposed how fragile those rules were. Across the galaxy, species watched and learned. The mighty Galactic Council had been brought low not by armies but by accountability. The Alliance of Independent Worlds stood firm not through force but through unity. And humanity, the newest spacefaring species, had changed the... 2 years had passed since humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council. 2 years since that initial refusal that had seemed so insignificant at the time. Now, as Ambassador Paul Hendricks stood before the second summit of the Alliance of Independent Worlds, he marveled at how much had changed. The conference hall was packed. Over 100 species had sent delegates. Some were former council members who'd left after Varthek's fall. Others had never been part of the council at all. A few were civilizations humanity had discovered in the past year, brought into the galactic community not as subordinates, but as equals. Paul called the summit to order. Welcome, everyone. We gather today not as members of a hierarchy, but as free peoples choosing to cooperate. The Alliance has grown beyond anything we imagined. Now we must decide what we want to become. A delegate from one of the former council species stood. Some of us believe we should create a new central authority, something to replace what the council was supposed to be, a proper government for the galaxy. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Paul had expected this. The temptation to recreate the old systems was strong. People were comfortable with hierarchy, with someone in charge, even if that someone had failed them before. Elder Kuthron of the Deepwater species rose to respond. His voice was gentle but firm. My friend, I understand your concern, but we didn't leave the council to create another one. We left because we were tired of being ruled. But surely we need some structure, another delegate argued. Some way to make decisions that affect us all. Paul stepped back to the podium. We propose something different. Not a government, but a forum. A place where any species can bring concerns, propose solutions, and coordinate with others who share their interests. No mandates, no enforcement. Just cooperation. How would that even work? Someone called out. Without authority, how do you maintain order? Admiral Kate Sullivan, attending as Earth's representative, stood to answer. The same way humanity has operated since we entered the galaxy. We make agreements based on mutual benefit. We honor them because it's in our interest to do so, and if circumstances change, we renegotiate. Trust and reputation are stronger than any enforcement mechanism. The debate continued for hours. Some species struggled with the concept. 5,000 years of council rule had taught them to look for authority figures. The idea of genuine voluntary cooperation seemed too fragile to work, but others understood. The younger species, mostly. The ones who'd never known council authority or had chafed under it. They saw the possibility in what humanity proposed. Freedom. Real freedom. Not granted by anyone, but inherent in their sovereignty. Finally, Zixril stood. The former council ambassador had become one of the Alliance's strongest voices. I served the council for 200 years, he said. I believed in hierarchy and order. I was wrong. The council's power rested on fear and dependency. This alliance rests on something stronger. Choice. And that makes all the difference. The vote came at sunset. The Galactic Forum was officially established. Not a government. Not an authority. Just a coordination body where species could work together voluntarily. Every member had equal voice. Any member could leave at any time. Decisions required consensus or they didn't happen. It was messy. It was inefficient. And it was exactly what the galaxy needed. While the political structures took shape, other changes rippled across the galaxy. Dr. Lisa Garrett's scientific collective had become the premier research network. Species shared knowledge freely, without the restrictions the council had imposed. The results were remarkable. Medical breakthroughs that had eluded the council for centuries emerged in months. Engineering solutions combining techniques from a dozen species created technologies none could have developed alone. The collective intelligence of free peoples, working together by choice, proved more powerful than any centralized research program. Lisa stood in her laboratory and reviewed the latest results. A cure for the wasting disease that had plagued the Felixian species for generations, developed collaboratively by human, deepwater, and Felixian researchers. No permits required, no approvals needed, just scientists working together because they wanted to help. This is what the council could have been, she said to her assistant, if they'd trusted people instead of trying to control them. Captain Jake Morrison was far from Earth, doing what he did best, exploring. The Vanguard had pushed beyond the boundaries of known space, discovering new systems and new civilizations. Each time they made contact, Jake offered the same thing humanity had offered everyone else. Partnership without strings attached. The latest discovery was a species called the Luminals. They'd achieved spaceflight a century ago, but had stayed close to their homeworld. afraid of what they might find in the larger galaxy. Stories of the Council's exploitation had reached even them. Their leader, a being of living light named Pray Tell, met Jake with cautious curiosity. "You say you want nothing from us?" Pray Tell asked. "No tribute? No allegiance?" "Nothing except maybe friendship," Jake replied. "And if you're interested, trade. We have things you might find useful. You probably have things we'd like. If not, that's fine too. Either way, you're welcome to join the Galactic Forum if you want or not. Your choice." Pray Tell's light pulsed with what Jake had learned to recognize as amusement. "You humans are strange. But I think we like you. Yes, we will join this forum. And we will trade. And perhaps in time we will be friends." 3 more species joined the forum that month, all discovered by human explorers, all welcomed as equals. The galaxy was growing more connected, but in a way fundamentally different from the Council's rigid hierarchy. Commander Nina Torres had found her place in the new order. The forum's collective defense initiative wasn't a military command. It was a network of mutual assistance, species who agreed to help each other if threatened. Nina coordinated the network, matching needs with capabilities. When pirates attacked a deep-water mining station, 3 nearby species responded immediately. Not because they were ordered to, because they'd agreed to. The pirates found themselves facing a coordinated defense from ships of 4 different designs, working together seamlessly. The pirates surrendered without a fight. Word spread quickly. The forum might not have a central military, but attacking forum members meant facing the combined response of whoever was nearby and willing to help. That turned out to be a powerful deterrent. Back on Earth, Kate Sullivan received a formal request from the forum. Would Earth host the next summit? The recognition of humanity's role in creating this new order was implicit. But so was the understanding that humans didn't see themselves as leaders. Just as the first among equals, Kate accepted with one condition. The summit would rotate among member worlds. No permanent capital. No species more important than others. Just a traveling forum where free peoples met as equals. The proposal was accepted unanimously. That was how decisions worked now, not through votes where majorities ruled minorities, through consensus where everyone had to agree or proposals were modified until they did. It was slower, but it was fairer. As for the old Galactic Council, it had dissolved shortly after Varthek's arrest. Some former members joined the forum. Others remained independent, content to trade and cooperate without formal agreements. A few tried to maintain the old structures, but without the enforcement mechanisms, those structures fell apart. Varthek himself died in custody, awaiting trial. Some said he'd given up, unable to process a galaxy that no longer needed him. Others whispered that he'd been allowed to die, that his secrets were too dangerous to air in court. The truth probably lay somewhere in between. A memorial was held, not to celebrate him, but to remember the lessons his fall had taught. Power built on corruption couldn't last. Authority that demanded obedience rather than earning trust would eventually collapse. The galaxy wouldn't forget. Melkera, the Felixian smuggler who'd been humanity's first alien ally, thrived in the new order. With trade barriers gone and regulations minimal, her skills were less about avoiding laws and more about finding the best routes and deals. She'd become one of the galaxy's most successful traders. She met with Jake Morrison at a space station that served as a hub for dozens of trade routes. "You humans broke the galaxy," she said with her characteristic purring laugh, "and somehow made it better in the process." "We didn't break anything," Jake replied. "We just stopped pretending the old way was the only way. That's what I mean. For 5,000 years, everyone assumed the council was necessary. You questioned that assumption. Turns out you were right." Jake looked out at the ships moving through the station. Human vessels mixed with Felixian, Deepwater, Luminal, and 100 others, all cooperating voluntarily, all pursuing their own interests while respecting everyone else's. "We were just being ourselves," he said. "Humans have a history of refusing to accept that someone else gets to tell us what to do. We brought that attitude to space. Turns out, a lot of species felt the same way. The galaxy was different now, messier in some ways. There was no central authority to appeal to when disputes arose. Species had to negotiate directly with each other. Some found that difficult, but most discovered that problems were easier to solve when you talked to people as equals, rather than petitioning distant bureaucrats.